Inflation in Malaysia. Inflation refers to the continuous increase in the general price level of goods and services over time. When inflation rises, the purchasing power of money decreases, meaning consumers can buy fewer goods and services with the same amount of income. In Malaysia, inflation became more noticeable after the COVID-19 pandemic, particularly during the year 2022. According to the Department of Statistics Malaysia, the Consumer Price Index or CPI reached 3.4% in 2022, which was the highest inflation rate recorded in more than 10 years. Food inflation remained high due to strong domestic demand and high import costs. In addition, global economic uncertainty, including supply chain disruptions and rising commodity prices, further contributed to inflationary pressures in the country. Overall, inflation remains one of the major macroeconomic challenges in Malaysia, affecting both households and businesses. Therefore, understanding inflation is important for analyzing the economy, the cost of living, and the effectiveness of government policies. Next is cost of inflation in Malaysia. In 2022, inflation in Malaysia was mainly caused by problems after the COVID-19 pandemic. First, supply chain disruption increased prices. During COVID-19, many factories, ports, and transport systems were closed. When the economy reopened, goods could not be supplied fast enough. This caused shortages and higher transport costs, which increased prices for consumers. This was reported by the Department of Statistics. Second, strong demand after the economy reopening pushed prices up. After lockdown ended, people spent more on food, travel, and services. Demand increased faster than supply, causing businesses to raise prices. Another cause was rising global food and oil prices. Since Malaysia imports many food items and food-related products, higher global prices increased domestic inflation. This was highlighted by the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank. The depreciation of the Malaysian ringgit also contributed to inflation. A weaker ringgit made imported goods and raw materials more expensive. Businesses faced higher costs and passed them on to consumers. Finally, higher production and labor costs increased inflation. Businesses had to pay more for wages, transport, and raw materials. To cover these higher costs, prices of goods and services were increased.
Okay, now I would like to present the effect of inflation in Malaysia in 2022, supported by reliable references. According to Department of Statistics Malaysia or DOSM, Malaysia inflation rate increased to around 3.3% in 2022, mainly driven by higher food price, transportation costs, and global supply disruptions. So, the first major effect on inflation was the rising cost of living. Based on DOSM Consumer Price Index report, prices of essential goods such as food and non-alcoholic beverage increased significantly. This made daily necessities more expensive and placed pressure on households' budget, especially for basic needs. So, the second effect was financial pressure on households. As reported by Bank Negara Malaysia, although the economy was recovering after the pandemic, wage growth did not increase by the same pace as inflation. This causes a decline in purchasing power, particularly among low and middle income households, making it harder for families to save money. The third effect was on business. According to Bank Negara Malaysia Economy and Monetary Review by 2022, business faced higher operating costs such as raw materials, logistics, and utilities. Many firms either pass these costs on to consumer through higher price or experience reduced profit margins. That's all. So, in conclusion, inflation in Malaysia 2022 increased living costs, reduced purchasing power, and create challenge for business. This impact highlight the importance of effective economic policy and government support protect the well-being of the people.
There are three government policies to control inflation. The first one is monetary policy by Bank Negara Malaysia (BNM). Monetary policy is used by the central bank to control inflation by regulating the money supply and interest rates. A contractionary monetary policy is implemented when the inflation is high. Bank Negara Malaysia increases interest rates, such as the overnight policy rate (OPR), to make borrowing more expensive. As a result, consumer and businesses reduce spending and investment, which lowers aggregate demand and helps control inflation. When BNM raised the OPR, bank loan interest rate increased. This discouraged people from taking housing or personal loans and reduced businesses' expansion, slowing down price increases in the economy. In 2022, BNM increased the overnight policy rate (OPR) in May and July 2022 by 25 basis points each time to normalize rate post-pandemic and curb inflationary pressure by making borrowing more expensive, thus cooling demand. The second one is fiscal policy. Fiscal policy refers to the government's use of public spending and taxation to influence economic activity. To control inflation, the government may reduce non-essential spending or increase tax to decrease the amount of money circulating in the economy. This helps reduce excessive demand for goods and services. For example, the government may reduce spending on luxury infrastructure projects or increase sales tax. This lowers consumers' purchasing power and helps prevent price from rising too quickly. The third one is price control and subsidies. Price control involves setting price ceiling on essential goods to prevent excessive price increases. Subsidies are provided to producers to reduce production costs, allowing them to sell goods at lower prices. These measures help protect consumers, especially from the low-income groups, from the rising cost of living. For example, the government set a price ceiling on cooking oil and fuel prices. At the same time, fuel subsidies are given to oil companies so petrol prices remain affordable despite global oil price increase. In 2022, the government provided substantial consumer subsidies around 80 billion to cushion the impact of rising costs on households.
2022 and 2023 Malaysia experiences high inflation mainly because of global food and fuel price increase. Even though the government and Bank Negara Malaysia took action, more recommendations can be made to keep inflation under control in the future. Firstly, Malaysia should continue use of tight monetary policy by maintaining higher interest rate. Borrowing become more expensive will help reduce spending and demand. This prevent price for rise too fast and keep inflation at the manageable level. Second, continue to control import and export wisely, reduce import tax and on essential goods like food and fuel can help lower domestic price when maintaining enough local supply prevents shortage. Third, Malaysia should invest in technology and innovation to increase production efficiency. When local industry produce more goods and lower cost, supply rise, which help balance demand and stability price. In conclusion, by continue tight monetary policy, controlling import and export and import production efficiency, Malaysia can effectively reduce inflation, protect consumers, and ensure long-term economic stability.
As we have seen throughout this documentary, inflation affects every layer of society, from the rising cost of a simple meal to the broader economic decisions made by policymakers. Although some factors are beyond national control, Malaysia continues to take proactive steps to manage inflation and support the well-being of its people. With strong policies, responsible planning, and continuous improvements to the economy, Malaysia can create a more stable and resilient future. In the end, inflation is not just an economic statistic. It is a reality that shapes the daily experiences of millions. This concludes our documentary on inflation, presented by Group 2. Thank you for your attention.